Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Loop1 live broadcast, the power to monitor and manage your network with ITOM solutions from SolarWinds. My name is Helen Owens-Pope. I'm responsible for global marketing here at Loop1, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar. So I'm delighted to be joined today by Loop1 CEO Bill Fitzpatrick, together with Eoin Keenan from Global Product Marketing at SolarWinds, and Sascha Giese, one of SolarWinds head geeks here in EMEA. We'll be kicking the session off with Bill, who will set the scene for today's webinar and provide an overview of IT operations management and introduce ITOM Plus, the Loop1 framework based on people, tools, and Lime, the Loop1 monitoring maturity model that pulls this all together to drive successful business outcomes. Following on from Bill, Eoin will provide an overview of SolarWinds network management portfolio. And for today's session, the focus will be on Network Performance Monitor and NetFlow Traffic Analyzer. However, Eoin will also provide some context in terms of where they sit within the SolarWinds ITOM portfolio before handing over to Sascha to dive a little deeper into some of the key features with the live demo. So before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. So all attendees will be muted throughout the course of today's webinar. If you experience any technical difficulties, you can send me a message via the chat panel in your event window. You can submit questions via the Q&A panel at any point during today's presentation, and I will put them to the panelists later in the session. Today's webinar is being recorded, and we'll share the link with all attendees, typically within about 48 hours of the live broadcast. And lastly, please let us know how we did today by completing the feedback survey at the end of the webinar. So now that you know the basics, on to the topic of the hour, and our first presenter today, Bill Fitzpatrick. Good morning, Bill.
Good afternoon, Helen, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. It's a pleasure to be here with Eoin and Sascha, and I really appreciate all of you taking the time again to be here for this presentation. So a brief couple of items on me. I am, as Helen mentioned, the CEO of Loop1 Systems, co-founded the company back in 2009 after spending a stint inside SolarWinds as a SolarWinds LATAM sales engineer, as it says there, también hablo español. In 2017, I bought out my partner and took sole ownership of Loop1, and it's really been a whirlwind 3 years since we made that change, driven primarily by international growth, and that came first in the form of the Kenson acquisition, and we're now proud to say that Kenson is fully rebranded and operating as Loop1 UK. And then later in 2019, we also expanded our APJ operations through the acquisition of the Xlate Group, which now brings us to a worldwide capability for delivering to SolarWinds clients of all sizes and shapes and complexities. And so we are more than 100 employees worldwide with offices in Austin, Texas, Cork, Ireland, London, Sri Lanka, Singapore, and Melbourne. And as Helen mentioned, we are really focused on delivering services to organizations in support of and pursuit of ideal and optimized IT operations management and IT service management. And we do that through something that we call ITOM Plus. ITOM Plus is a methodology that we have created that really helps organizations speak the language of what good looks like when you're deploying tools. We spend a lot of money on tools, and getting those tools working correctly involves making sure that first we have the right people in the right places doing the right things. And it's not just about the people that are inside your organization, but it's the people that you partner with outside. And so obviously with this conversation, that includes SolarWinds, folks like Sascha and Eoin and product managers from across the SolarWinds team interacting with you through platforms like Thwack, as well as through user experience sessions and a number of other ways that SolarWinds really looks to engage with your teams to make sure that their products do what you need them to do. And from a Loop1 perspective, we want to bring that strategic conversation back to the tools so that we can ensure that we have integration, automation, and scalable architecture to cover the most complex deployments in the world, as well as optimized deployments of any size that are mature and functioning to the best of their ability. And of course, from a tools perspective, we are talking about today Network Performance Monitor and NetFlow Traffic Analyzer, but we're talking about any and all of the tools that you deploy. And precisely, we're talking about feature complete, full stack visibility, right? Knowing that every tool you've invested in is a tool that's been deployed to its full capabilities. We hear time and time again from clients that there are things that SolarWinds can do that they didn't know could be done. And so when we talk about being feature complete, that's really what we mean, is to understand the capabilities of the tools you've invested in and to make sure that those capabilities are being leveraged throughout the organization. So adoption and enablement, as well as across all of your applications from a sort of a full stack perspective. Increasingly, we live in a hybrid world. And so we've got tools that are deployed to monitor things from the data center to the desktop, and including cloud native and cloud hybrid resources. And so if we want to monitor those end user experiences and those business outcomes, then we need tools that can reach across the stack from the cloud to the data center and to the end user. And that's what we're talking about with that full stack visibility and leveraging tools to do what they can. And then, of course, tools today, we have so many different tools that each specialize in certain types of functionality. With tools like NetFlow Traffic Analyzer and Network Performance Monitor, there is native integration and native correlation of data. And there's some great ways that you can easily see the relationships between applications and their corresponding NetFlow traffic. And we'll see some of that in the demo later. But what if we want to go beyond that? What if we want to do incident management? What if we want to integrate with ITSM? What if we want to integrate with a non-SolarWinds tool? Well, all of that automation and integration exists today through various APIs on the back end. And that's another area where Loop1 brings expertise to help your organization make that automation and integration happen. And then finally, that brings us to our framework, the Loop1 monitoring maturity model, which we've developed as a detailed run book that allows us to say, these are the best practices across all of the layers in the ITOM and ITSM stack, so that when we look at how well our tools are running, we can conclusively say that they are doing what we need them to do. And we do that with our clients through what we call an ITOM maturity assessment. This is something that is relatively new to the industry. I haven't seen other partners doing anything like this to much extent yet, and we're really excited to be bringing this to market. What we're finding is that clients are ready to engage and have a conversation about how their tools are working together. And what it's uncovering is a lot of new information for clients around the way that SolarWinds tools can work best together. So understanding the benefits of owning all of the tools in what we call App Stack, which is that full stack visibility that SolarWinds provides if you invest in not just NPM and NetFlow, but also Web Performance Monitor and Virtualization Manager, Storage Resource Monitor, Database Performance Analyzer, a series of tools that SolarWinds offers that combined create automatically correlated and automatically integrated information. And then we're going to, of course, go beyond that with our maturity assessment to look at the non-SolarWinds tools that you own and how the platforms can be integrated and automated for incident management, as well as reporting and data analytics. And that is our ITOM maturity assessment. And of course, on top of that, if you don't know that your tools are implemented correctly, then you're not going to be able to trust the data that they generate. So when it comes to SolarWinds, we're proud to offer our standard in-depth health check that we've offered for years as a separate component of what we might do in an ITOM maturity assessment. And so just briefly on Lyme, what we're really talking about here is using tools correctly so that we can make sure that we are reducing risk to the business, improving business outcomes, and really delivering those digital user experiences that we intend to be able to have insightful analytics, right, from data that we know we can trust, so that we can do forecasting, budgeting, reporting that can help drive business decisions. And that also is going to mean that we're going to integrate our tools in a way that the data analytics are not based on just a single tool, but all of the data from disparate tools. And then, of course, within that, we got to have the audit and compliance that we need to meet our regulatory requirements, whether it's GDPR or any number of other regulatory requirements that might be affecting your organization, whether you're in healthcare or finance. And we want to help to make sure that our dashboards and our information sharing are breaking down the silos while still making sure that every silo is as strong as it needs to be. So if your database team has the best tools, but your web performance monitoring could use some maturity, we want to make sure that those things are happening in parallel and that they are leveraging each other to improve awareness and visibility through sharing information. And that's coming to that concept of consistency of operational maturity across teams. And then once we have that consistent maturity, we want to make sure that that data is accessible, right? So we want to really understand who should be adopting the solutions and what can we do for enablement to those stakeholders across the organization so that increasingly there are people who are able to leverage the Orion console in ways that make their jobs easier for decision making and for understanding the delivery of those digital user experiences. And then, of course, if we're doing everything correctly in the Lime model and the ITOM Plus framework, we're going to find ways to reduce costs and reduce redundancy, reduce overlap between tools, and ideally be able to do some tool consolidation. And so there's a quick look at the Lime model itself. This is a single page grid that's designed to be used by yourself and your team to be able to sort of understand where you are. So you might be in a fragmented state where you've got some dedicated tooling happening, or you might be in a typical state where your tools are well deployed, but maybe you've got some noise and alerts, or maybe you've got some features that you didn't know about, or you don't have all of the correlation that you'd like to have. We like to say that the fastest way to get from typical to optimized is to run app stack. And that's exactly what we see in the optimized column. Is the theme is correlation and the theme is automation. But what we're really trying to do is get to insightful that we've talked about, which is strong data analytics and strong stakeholder involvement and intelligent dashboards. So, but the root of all of this is really making sure that every tool we invest in is deployed and achieving these four key outcomes on the right there. We want to make sure that all of our applications are hitting the performance and availability metrics that they should, while at the same time being compliant and secure. So there's a little bit on ITOM Plus and Lime. And what I want to do now is go ahead and turn it over to Eoin and Sascha so that they can share with you the details around NPM and NetFlow. Thank you, gentlemen.
So can you see my screen?
I can.
Very good. Okay, guys. First of all, let me start off by, on behalf of SolarWinds, thanking Loop1 for having us here with them today. And of course, a big thank you to everybody who's joined us on the webinar also. So just to briefly introduce myself, my name is Eoin Keenan. I'm one of the product marketing managers here at SolarWinds. I've been in the IT industry for about 30 years now, so kind of showing my age. So I've seen a lot of the changes that have occurred right through the years. And of course, Sascha Giese is one of our head geeks, and you'll talk to Sascha in a moment around the demo side of things. So I've been in SolarWinds myself for about 6 months. Most of my career I spent in EMC, which of course is now Dell EMC. They're also here in Cork. Okay, so I'd like to actually start off by doing, if you like, a sort of a quick overview of SolarWinds, just to really kind of frame the more specific discussion around NPM and NTA a little bit later on. So talk a little bit more about the kind of broader story of what SolarWinds is doing. So I suppose from a kind of a branding perspective, if people know a little bit about SolarWinds, they're typically going to think about a company that does network performance monitoring and management. And this is no surprise because this is really what we started off to do many years ago. And NPM, which is literally Network Performance Monitor, is the flagship product and one of the products, of course, that you're going to look at here today. However, SolarWinds has been doing lots more stuff in the last number of years. And this is, of course, enabled through multiple acquisitions, so that now we're looking at increased, expanded product sets and new focus areas. And Bill has touched on some of this already. There's no doubt that the world has changed quite a lot in the last couple of months with all this COVID-19 business. It's certainly changed our lives. changed the way that we work, and the IT industry is no exception to that. And I suppose really the IT industry is certainly a very dynamic industry. It's an industry that's really changing at a pretty, I would say, a faster pace than most businesses down through the years, and that pace of acceleration, I'm sure you'll agree, has picked up quite a bit in the last number of years. When I started way back in the late 80s, early 90s, that kind of time frame, things were an awful lot simpler. You're looking at customers, there were far fewer customers with IT, of course, and you know, single mainframe systems, green screens, all that kind of thing. So once your mainframe is up and your green screens are on, you're good to go. And then, of course, throughout the 90s, we saw the proliferation of client-server systems, Unix, Windows, all that good stuff. Fantastic, driving down cost with commodity computing, but adding complexity and distribution. And then, of course, we had VMware in 2003, bringing us again virtualization at the commodity compute layer, followed by, you know, private cloud, hybrid cloud, public cloud, software as a service, all of these wonderful things. Now, of course, this is absolutely fantastic for the end users, because it means today they have amazing choice in terms of a variety of places from where they can consume applications. This idea of BYOD, all of these great terms we hear, a variety of devices on which they can consume their services. However, you guys have to keep it up and running in the background, and the network is an absolutely critical part in all of this. So some interesting statistics here that, you know, almost 30% of IT teams' bandwidth is spent dealing with digital performance issues. So obviously we're talking about things maybe not working correctly, some kind of a degradation in service, performance issues, and so on. And the average cost of resolving these issues is $2.5 million annually. Sometimes it's substantially more than that, or it might be substantially less, depending on the size of the company. But in any event, it's a considerable amount of money to be concerned about. When we talk about SolarWinds IT operations management, and I suppose really we're kind of talking about three key areas plus one financial aspect to that. So the first one is if we're monitoring applications, say monitoring the availability and performance of the full IT stack. So if you have an application on the top of the stack, obviously we want to be able to monitor that effectively, but clearly there's multiple different elements in the stack upon which this application is depending. And what we want to be able to do is to provide, if you like, a one-stop shop so that you can get your monitoring and management and analytics across the full stack. The second piece here, aligning people and processes and technology. And here we're really looking around IT service management, or I suppose service management more generally here. And again, this is an area where SolarWinds has been really expanding the portfolio in the last number of years. So for example, with the acquisition of a company called SamManage, and out of this we have a couple of different offerings. We have a licensed on-premise offering called Web Help Desk, and also something called SolarWinds Service Desk, which is a fully fledged ITSM type of system, a SaaS-based model with all the things you might expect, you know, change management, CMDB management, asset management, incident management, and so on. And the third piece here then is security. So obviously security is something that really should be applying relevant right across the whole IT stack, because people want to try and find some backdoor to get into your system and cause some kind of harm. And again, SolarWinds has been really busy in this area with development and acquisitions and that. And we have a number of solutions here to provide external threat protection, internal user permissions, data protection, for example, system vulnerability protection, and ID theft protection with a company, a product called SolarWinds Identity Monitor. So a couple of examples there. And like I said, the last piece then is the kind of commercial piece. So the thing is that we want to make all of this as flexible and affordable as possible. So we continue to offer the kind of the familiar on-premise license type options. But we also have all of our technology available on a subscription basis. And of course, there's also the SaaS-based products. And here's the framework, if you like, and a more visual kind of view of things. So on top, we have the service management. And then we have the monitoring, management, and analytic layers in orange, the orange boxes there. And like I said, of course, IT security, which is straddling the whole picture here. In terms of who we typically deal with, I suppose, obviously, very frequently dealing with the administrator, the admin persona. So, of course, network admins, database admins, sysadmins, and so on. Now, maybe if we're having more of some people might call it platforming discussion, where we're looking at having everything in a single pane of glass. Sorry to use that cliche, but then we're probably talking about the IT management layer. And then if we're looking at the whole ecosystem, we're up at that stage, we're up at the CXO layer, CIO, CISO, CTO, and so on like that. In terms of where the technology sits, well, obviously we have to be cognizant of the fact that you may have applications which are either on-premise or in the cloud, software as a service applications, and we want to provide solutions to monitor all of those scenarios. Again, your infrastructure may be installed on-premise in your data center or in the cloud, and we can monitor for those scenarios as well. And indeed, the last but not least, SolarWinds technology and Orion platform can be installed on-premise, as we've been doing for years, or in the cloud environment in Azure and Amazon. Now, in terms of how organizations typically work with this, I'd probably break this down into kind of 3 areas, simplistically, really. So it could be that somebody has a very specific problem. So maybe, for example, they can't monitor something, there's some specific problem in the network around performance or availability, and they want to sort of tackle that in the short term. And we can help them to solve these problems. We can find the best product to fit that in conjunction with our partners, of course, and then solve that as more of a short-term kind of a tactical sort of fix and move on. But typically, the second thing really is more common these days around the idea of kind of platforming, where if a customer has multiple SolarWinds products, they want to be able to consolidate all of this into one tool and have this single pane of glass effect. And then the last piece, the third piece, is what we call interconnected solutions for interconnected problems. And we see just a couple of examples down the bottom where there might be some issues around application performance in conjunction with database management, and we can put together solutions to solve for that type of issue. Or it could be like the second example here, IT security concerns around the network area of things, so we can combine solutions to solve for this. So really we can look at all of these pillars and look at various different combinations to come up with these interconnected solutions. This next picture is a very simplified picture, but just to kind of get the idea across. Now, this is a typical kind of a scenario that many people will be dealing with in terms of all of the elements that you have on the slide here. The reality for most people is that there's probably going to be an awful lot more of the boxes that you see on in their data center. So obviously we have all of the infrastructure pieces, the network, servers, operating systems, hypervisors, the applications that we have, database, storage, backup, disaster recovery, software as a service, the list goes on, and everything in between. And what we very frequently see is that people will have a plethora of different tools, maybe some purchased, some kind of free tools, some open source, in order to try and look at those different individual layers in a kind of stovepipe fashion. And typically the tools don't really work very well together. So this becomes very, very complicated, very complex, and a very kind of a firefighting mode of way of working. Okay. So we see here, our objective here is really to simplify the environment, put all of the tools into one single pane of glass, and have a much more cohesive, interoperable, and interconnected environment. Our partners are absolutely key in this. We have partners in practically every country in the world. And of course, partners like Loop1, absolutely critical in terms of implementing and optimizing the systems on the ground. So we don't really do professional services as such as a company. So looking at network management, we look at a couple of key systems here, key technologies here. So in terms of network management, obviously network performance is absolutely critical here. And ironically, we see SMB customers being typically the ones that are moving most quickly into the cloud because they're looking at reducing costs and simplifying things. Of course, what that means is that the network is in between all of their clients and all of their services. If it goes down, if there's a performance issue, this is a huge problem. We can break this down into 3 areas, if you like, network down. The impact of that, operational, where we have to redeploy resources from a project to fixing these issues. This is going to impact the project. Financial, if it's a revenue generating application, then there's going to be a loss of let's say profits associated with that. And then the last one, which is the worst one, reputational, where the last thing you need is to have an outage and having this ending up on Twitter as a story. So in terms of network management and monitoring, we have a bunch of different solutions here. You're going to see the first 2 here later on the demo, NPM, looking at the health status of devices right across the network. You want to be able to see what's flowing on the network, how your bandwidth is being utilized. And then, of course, you have configuration management, VoIP management, IP address management, and user device tracking. And then in terms of log management, we have an on-premise solution called Log Analyzer and a SaaS-based solution called Logly, which is really more working with sort of custom type devices, custom type apps, I should say, pardon me. Okay, so if we look into this in a little bit more, drill down into a little bit more detail, this is a good point maybe to sort of take a screenshot or something. You get the whole picture of what SolarWinds does right across the whole stack. So we see all of the different infrastructure pieces here, the pillars, application, database, infrastructure, network, security, and service management. And then what you see on the left-hand side is that they're licensed on-premise products here. And then on the right-hand side, we have software as a service offerings there. Now, today, the network, in the network side of things, we don't have software as a service offerings yet, but as I say, watch this space and you may see something coming in the future here. Okay, I'm just going to hand over just shortly over to Sascha, but just to briefly mention here, NPM again is really our flagship product, just to cover a couple of points here. So NPM is without doubt the market leader in the world in this area today. And obviously it's a vendor agnostic type of technology. So whether you're working on projects with Cisco or Palo Alto, Dell, you name it, NPM can work with all of these different vendors. So very, very powerful in that way. NetPath is a really nice, unique end-to-end sort of hop-by-hop way of viewing your path and if there's any issues on there. And the nice thing is that let's say the target device could be on-premise, or indeed it could be in a different country, for example, New York to London, or indeed it could even be in a service provider. So lots of flexibility in that. You'll probably see that from Sascha later on as well. I would encourage you to go over to Trust Radius. It's a great place to see reviews. It's always good to see what other customers are saying about the technology. So go over there and have a look at that. There's reviews on all of our technology there. I wasn't intending on really drilling down here, but just to mention, we've very recently had a brand new update called 2020.2, and we have a bunch of different updates in here, and you can see all of these under release management. We also have a couple of videos up on the site there as well to give you more information here. Some nice things around hybrid monitoring and stuff like that. NetFlow Traffic Analyzer, again, this is really about saying, well, okay, I want to be able to monitor my various devices, but I also want to be able to monitor what's flowing in my network. Maybe somebody's watching Netflix and bogging down the bandwidth, and I want to be able to have a nice fine-grained view of how my network is being used. So you've got very powerful technology in NetFlow Traffic Analyzer here. Again, Trust Radius, a good place to go for more quotes on that. And again, we have a lot of updates. Have a look on our site for information around that. And then finally here, as I mentioned before, we have given more options to our customers here. So we have the familiar on-premise working with CapEx budgets where you can purchase persistent licenses here. We can also, you can also take any of this technology on a subscription basis. And this can be very handy, maybe if you want to try it out and maybe you're starting a new project and going at a nice lower price point and then decide how you want to carry on with that into the future. It's not a SaaS-based, just to clear up that confusion. This is a subscription for the technology which has been around for quite some time. Okay. So thank you very much for your time. That was very quick, but I'll at this point I'll hand back to Sascha for the actual demo. The bit that you want to see all the bells and whistles.
Okay, hi guys. So I'm the presenter. So let me quickly share my screen. By the way, you probably hear by my accent that I'm from Germany, and I'm actually in Germany right now in Berlin, and I'm waiting for a guy fixing something in my kitchen, and he gave me a window between 1 and 5 o'clock. That's 4 hours. What happened with the German punctuality? I don't know. So worst case, I might open the door for a moment. Anyway, let's log in and let me walk you through Network Performance Monitor and NetFlow Traffic Analyzer. What you guys see on the screen right now is the Orion platform. And some of the products that Eoin mentioned earlier are part of the platform, which is basically a modular system because not everyone needs all of those modules over there. So what you see on the left side of my screen is basically the individual modules like network, NetFlow, and so on and so on and so on. Okay, and on a technical level, you would just deploy it on a Windows machine. Could be a VM. It runs on the cloud. It doesn't matter, and it needs a SQL database in the background. Anyway, let's talk about a few things. I'm pretty sure that most people here in the call, everyone in the call, has already seen network performance monitoring in one or another way. But let me show you a few things that are a bit different in the world of SolarWinds. So first of all, I think I've seen this in Owen's slide. We added new maps into the product, and the maps have a really nice feature. We can now travel back in time in a visual way. There is one or two examples. I see one here, Active Directory servers. Okay, might not be a network feature, but let's assume it could be something network related. Okay, so we see a map right now on my screen, and this is dynamic. I can click on everything. I can move it around and change the format. I'm not an administrator here, so I'm a little bit limited with my options, but here's the nice button on top, view history. So I click this guy, and it will now show me the last 24 hours. I can change the time frame to last 30 days or whatever I'm interested in. And if I click into a different time, it will show me what was different. And there's a few red elements. Let me click into this. So there's something red. It's really tiny here on my screen. There's a problem in a data center. So I click this guy, and it will open more details. What we see now is a feature called PerfStack or performance analysis. It's also a feature of the platform, like the maps. And it automatically populates data of whatever element I just clicked on. It could have been a firewall, it could have been a switch, it doesn't matter, okay? So we see at the right side some random performance metrics like CPU and round trip time. And I also see some red elements down there at the bottom. And there's obviously an alert situation happening at this time. So this is kind of a visual approach instead of in the past just looking into logs and being a bit more you need to spend time looking into logs and look into patterns. It's much easier to use such a visual system. Now, let me share a really amazing feature of Network Performance Monitor with you, which is called NetPath. So we added NetPath to the product in, I don't know, 2016, might be 2017. So it's a couple of years there already, but it is still the only monitoring system in the world with such a feature. So what does it do? It shows you the path of an application through a network. And it doesn't matter if it's your network, if it's the provider network, or some destination network at the cloud. There's an easy example. This one here, Office 365 is my destination, right? Microsoft Cloud. And I run 4 different data centers, could be branch offices, doesn't matter, okay? So if I click into this, it will open the path, and I need to zoom into this a little bit, right? So here is my point A, and that could be a virtual machine, a server, a workstation, doesn't matter. And for the technical guys here in the call, it might look a little bit like a visual trace route, but that's not what it is. A trace route has a major problem. It's using the wrong protocols. A trace route, depending on the operating system, is using ICMP or UDP, but our applications are usually using TCP. So that is what we do here. It is a TCP-based hop-by-hop analysis. Because it is TCP, we need a port, and there is this one is a simple example. It's TCP 443 HTTPS. So we're now following the HTTPS packages, okay? And the first item we hit is one of our own catalysts. I could click it. It will open the device view. It's not so interesting. Let's move on. We following the packets, and here you see an AS number. In case you don't know what that is, it's an autonomous system. Let's say it's an area code in the internet to make it easy to understand. And in fact, this one here is our internet service provider. So we see external IPs here, public IPs. This is no longer my territory. This is ISP, okay? I have no control over this. And without such a tool, not even any visibility. In between the nodes, you always see the milliseconds, which is the additional hop-to-hop time for the TCP 443 packages. Now, let's assume that the first machine here, RTR, whatever it is, let's assume that one would have an issue. So obviously the hop time would go up, and we would point it out in red. And the only thing the user needs to do is to click it. And we show a nice overview of what it is, who owns it, and where can I complain right now. Again, I'm German, I like to complain, okay? So there's a telephone number, and it still isn't my node, but I know what is my next step, and that is to pick up the phone and tell them that there is obviously a problem. So this is really, really nice, and it will minimize the time to resolve an issue with an application somewhere in the delivery significantly. Actually, let's have a look. This is Office 365. So at the end of the path, this would be Microsoft Azure. Okay, looks quite interesting here. And Azure is a software-defined network. So in 10 minutes, it might look completely different. Again, as we saw in the map here, is a feature to travel back in time. Everything is green here. So it's probably good for us. It's just not so good to show it because we can't show any problems. It's okay. It's fine. If there would be an issue, we would click it, similar to the map, and we see more details. But let's go one step back. Before someone can actually start with troubleshooting, there's one very important question, and that is, whose responsibility is it? And it usually comes down to a 50-50 chance. Is it something in the network or something else? And we all know if something is slow, like a mailbox is opening slow, everyone is like, it's the network is slow. As a former network engineer, let me tell you, no, it is rarely the network. It is usually something else. If it comes to me, it would always be the database, but that's a different story. Now, if someone is working in IT for a long time, there's usually a good educated guess to explain this is a network issue or something else. But guessing doesn't get us anywhere. So we need to prove this. We have a nice feature for this. The feature is called Quality of Experience, and that is a nice name for deep packet inspection. The way we use deep packet inspection is pretty simple. We just want to show you two values. At the right-hand side, we see the network response time. That is just a TCP handshake. It's simple. It tells me how long did it take for a certain connection to be established. Next to this is another chart showing the application response time. This is a little bit more complicated. It's easy to understand if we talk about a database. So if we send a query to a database, the database needs some time to reply with an answer, okay? And we're measuring this time and compare it with the network connectivity time. And based on these two values, we know pretty much exactly if this is a network issue or something else. At this place, we don't know if this is a problem with the server or with the application, but for us right now, it's important to know it's not a network problem. So if I'm the network admin, I have a cup of coffee and my VMware guys need to have a look. This is a really nice feature and part of the network performance monitor. On a very basic level, here in my online demo at the left-hand side, we see a couple of vendors. As Eoin mentioned, it doesn't really matter what kind of vendors are in place. In the past, everyone did at least try to stick to one vendor, but meanwhile, most purchases are project-based. So we need something right now, anything that ticks the boxes and it's available. So we would see over time loads of different vendors in the usual IT department. And we talk to all of them. We use standard protocols like SNMP or WMI with Windows, but also we added a little bit more in-depth for interesting devices. So, for example, for an ASA or a Palo Alto or Nexus, whatever, let's open an ASA. There's a pretty strong out-of-the-box support. And in regards to the ASA, all you have to do is to link it using an SSH account. And we pull configurations, we pull site-to-site connections, we see individual VPN connections, and everything is automatically available and always up to date. This year, I think it's a cluster, so there should be a second one somewhere. And we also see the access lists and rules, which is pretty nice, actually. Okay, so let's assume a tool like Network Performance Monitor gives us a warning, a threshold has been reached. By the way, it's called Network Performance Monitor, but we can use this to monitor servers, we can use this to monitor environmental sensors, we can use this to monitor clouds, by the way. So it's a pretty nice tool. But let's assume that whatever we're monitoring, an uplink of a router or firewall, we get an alert for high utilization, like 95%. So there's just a little headroom left. And yes, there is features like QoS, our voice connections should still be fine, but a saturated line is saturated, okay? So what we need to know is what exactly is causing bandwidth issues. And this is where another module is coming into the game. It's called NetFlow Traffic Analyzer. And it's naturally the first add-on most network customers go for. So NetFlow Traffic Analyzer supports any IPFix compatible flow protocol. So it could be NetFlow, which is from Cisco. It could be JFlow, SFlow, RFlow, whatever flow. So each vendor has their own protocol. And what we see here right now is information about the flow of traffics. There's a few different things you could do here in regards to using the tool. You could go for a search, for a source. Usually you would have a NetFlow source in each office, in east data center, at least one, okay? So if I click into East 1 Cube, whatever this one is, I would see all the traffic that's flowing through this device. And what I'm interested in afterwards is probably applications, maybe, okay, or different endpoints. I should see endpoints here. There's another way to use this tool, and this is called the Flow Navigator here at the left-hand side. It's pretty cool if you know exactly what you're looking for. So let's assume we want to know what server A and server B exchanged yesterday afternoon because there was a bandwidth issue. We could just use the Flow Navigator and use the Conversations tool. We would give it the 2 IP addresses of the servers, okay, and also the time frame. That's somewhere here, time period, okay. I'll tell him what time I'm interested in, and it will automatically populate this information. Right now, on top, I'm looking at the last hour overall ingress and egress on both directions and both IP protocols. So we see loads of data here. And if we click into a source, let's see this one here maybe, like a SQL box, I see all the communication coming from or going through the SQL machine. Okay, so here is my box, and you could further drill down into any kind of so now we see this into any kind of conversations. So NetFlow is a protocol that needs to be enabled on a source, which is a device, okay, a physical device usually, or for the data center guys, we support VDS2. So VMware's virtual distributed switches are a very good way to get information of what's happening inside a host. And it will send all the statistics for the communication inside the host or the vCenter, basically. And it would look similar to what we see right now here on my screen. My screen is probably a bit tiny, but I hope this is visible. Here's the protocol overview, so we would see here's not much happening, a bit of UDP, a bit of TCP, probably a lot of DNS resolution. We see the application overview. Now, this is interesting. Let me have a look. I have like 3 more minutes. The NetFlow protocol is a pretty old protocol. It's been invented by Cisco in the late 90s or something. And the application information is coming from the port numbers, which was fine back in the days. Today, not so much. There's a different solution called NBAR, which is a deep packet inspection again, provided by Cisco, and we are able to pull that information too on top of the NetFlow data. So it will resolve the applications based on deep packet inspection. So the NetFlow Traffic Analyzer is pretty straightforward, actually. It will show us what kind of protocol, what kind of application, and who sent, who received. And that's all the traffic stats that we could collect. We can build alerts on it. The obvious alerts would be if there's too much utilization, but you can be very creative. So we're still looking at a SQL box. You could just say that it's perfectly fine to have like a 10% utilization of SQL traffic, and suddenly there's just 2. Something is wrong. So we could create such an alert too, and it will warn us what's happening. So obviously this works with different vendors, and that's through the whole product. Yeah, there's not too much time. I would love to show Palo Alto, but I think we're running out of time. So I'll stop my screen share now, and I'm returning to Helen.
Thanks, Sascha. Yes, so I'm just handing back to Bill to run through some final slides. While we are doing that, I did have one question come in. So you showed NetPath as part of the demo. One of the questions was whether NetPath was included with NPM, or is it purchased separately?
NetPath is a feature of the Network Performance Monitor, and there's no need to purchase any feature. It comes with the smallest package.
Okay, thank you, Sascha. And back to you, Bill.
Thanks, Helen. Thanks, Sascha. Thanks, Eoin. That's terrific. So as we look at these concepts that Sascha and Eoin have shared with us today, I think that it really takes us back to what we were speaking of as we went into the conversation. When we think about monitoring our environment today, we really have to think about it from an end-to-end perspective, and we have to think about it from the perspective of who are the key stakeholders that need to see the information associated to that digital user experience that we're trying to deliver. And as you're getting started, you're going to start with tools like NPM and NTA. From an NPM perspective, as Eoin mentioned, it's going to cover everything that you have in your network that is a server, a host, a network device, Internet of Things objects, pretty much anything with an IP address. When we move forward to add additional information to increase the visibility, we're going to talk about tools like NetFlow Traffic Analyzer, which is a very common next step once you've got your network performance monitor in place, so that you can begin to see, as Sascha demonstrated, who's using the network and what are they using it for, and how can we leverage that information to understand our application performance delivery. So for example, using NetFlow, we can see things like the amount of Zoom traffic or WebEx traffic or Microsoft Teams traffic. We can monitor traffic related to remote workers that are coming in over different interfaces supporting VPN sessions. There are a number of different ways that NetFlow contributes to telling the story of how well our network is providing that end user experience that we need to provide. And so we've got a few more minutes here. We want to make sure we've opened it up to any other questions that you might have. I will just comment, a little bit of an additional comment on the question about NetPath. Today, we demoed two products. Sascha showed both NPM and NetFlow. So everything that you saw today was included in one of those two products. From an NPM perspective, that certainly includes NetPath. It includes all of the new intelligent map capabilities. It includes the quality of experience capability that you saw that's looking at the network response time versus the application response time. And then as we look at NetFlow, it includes that ability to receive flows from all of the different vendors in your environment that support sending flow. And most recently, the VMware VDS environments that Sascha mentioned is a really fantastic way to bridge that gap between the network and the host to see in greater detail on a per host basis or a per VDS basis the type of application traffic that we see for the guests on those switches. So let's see, any other questions coming in, Miss Helen?
There are indeed. There's a question on the chat panel. There are a lot of Cisco-specific tools, I suppose understandably, but there appears no way to get similar information manually on other devices. Don't know who wants to...
So, yeah, there is a lot of native support in the product for Cisco. We saw the ASA insights, but that does also extend to Palo Alto. There are some insights for Palo Alto, but pretty much anything that you want to know about a device, as long as the device supports a protocol that SolarWinds supports. So most of the time that's going to be SNMP, or in the case of a Windows environment, WMI. In the case of SNMP, if the device has an OID, which is the object ID for a particular piece of information, then Orion can always retrieve it. And so while it can be a little bit more manual, that is where groups like Loop1 and of course the THWAC community can really help you understand how to gain additional insights from your vendors, even if it's not a native feature in NPM. So through a custom poller using the universal device poller, you can go and get any information from any SNMP object to learn more about what might be happening on that object. So if you're not familiar with that, go take a look on THWAC, the universal device poller. And of course, you can always send a question over to Loop1 and we'll be happy to help you with that as well. Did I see some other questions coming in there, Helen?
Most of them were related to that. There's another one which I've just fired over on chat to you about the ability to add the same node multiple times in Orion maps for devices that support virtual instances, so firewalls and routers.
Sascha, do you want to tackle that one?
Yeah. To be honest, I don't know. We could probably add it as an unmonitored node. So like it would be like a passive node. So you would have one the standard monitoring for the default node and add it again as a passive node. it will be a bit of a trouble if the IP address is exactly the same. If it's a different context, we might have an idea to fix this, but you definitely need an engineer for this. So Loop1 is the perfect solution for this.
Thanks, Sascha. Yeah, there will be times where we may run into design limitations of the way that different products work, and we'll always be looking for creative ways to overcome those limitations. More often than not, there are built-in functionality to achieve what it is we're looking to do. But when we reach those edges of the product's capability, that's certainly what Loop1 is there to help with. Okay, well, we have about 5 minutes left. Helen, we'll do one last check on questions here.
Yep, no more questions at the moment.
All right, terrific. Well, I'll take this opportunity to go ahead and wrap up from Loop1's perspective. I wanted to just share a couple of other quick notes with you. One of the offerings that we have available to our clients is something we call our Rapid Report Card for Orion. And this is just a free 2-hour conversation with you and your team to take a look at how well Orion is working for you and give you a report card, give you some ideas about what you might be what you might do that you aren't doing currently, or some improvements that we can make to the performance, assessing the database, or assessing the way that discovery has been done, or even looking at the users that you've added to the system and how those users are getting value out of it. So if you're interested in a rapid report card for your SolarWinds Orion environment, please reach out to us and we'll be happy to schedule that with you at no cost. And that brings us to the end of our webinar. I'll turn it over to Eoin and Sascha for parting comments. Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, I'd just like to say thank you very much again for attending. It was a pleasure to work with Loop1 again today. Sascha, if you want to say any final words of wisdom from Berlin.
the final words of wisdom. No, thanks, guys. Thanks for listening. And I'm still puzzled by the very first slide today, seeing Bill's introduction slide with the technical certifications. It's pretty good if the CEO of the technical company achieves such certifications. So impressive. Well done.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Sascha. I try not to talk about it too much because I'm mostly disappointed that I failed the ARM exam and then I failed the troubleshooting exam. But I did have my moment in the sun where I did pass the first 5 SCPs, and I'm proud to say that we've got a couple of individuals who have, in fact, inside Loop1, passed all available SCP exams. So we do certainly have our expertise within the team here, and the exams are available. And that is also worth mentioning as we wrap up here. If you are interested in learning more about the SolarWinds Certified Professional Program, there are resources in the Customer Success Center. There you can go and use SolarWinds team to learn more about the certifications as well as certification preparation. There are some SCP courses available from the Customer Success Center. If you prefer a traditional classroom setting with your own server and a hands-on lab experience, then we do also offer a SolarWinds certified professional course for both the NPM exam as well as the SAM server application monitor exam. So both those SCP prep courses are available through Loop1, and there will be more SCP prep courses to come here in the near future. So thanks again to Sascha and to Eoin, and of course, thanks to Ms. Helen for hosting, and thanks to all of you for participating in the webinar today. Please reach out to us here at Loop1 or your friends at SolarWinds if there's any additional questions we can answer for you. Have a great week. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Bye,
thanks,
guys.
everybody. And please complete the survey when you leave as well, just to give us your feedback. That would be greatly appreciated.